Welcome to Reddit's for Sleep, your peaceful place to unwind, relax, and drift gently into restful sleep. Tonight's real Reddit stories are slowly told and carefully chosen to calm your mind and ease you into rest. If you're new here, please subscribe and join our calm community so you never miss a moment of peace. Now, get comfortable, breathe deeply, and let the stories carry you softly into dreamland. Story 1. I never thought the quiet neighbor would break my marriage. I never imagined that a gentle wave and a few kind words over the fence would lead to the unraveling of a 20-year marriage. My name is Alicia. I'm 47. My husband, Darren, is 51. We've been together since our early 20s. We raised 2 kids who are now off at university. We were comfortable, not wildly in love anymore, but stable, predictable. A team, mostly. Then, Helen moved in next door. She was in her early 60s, I think. Soft-spoken, kind eyes. Widowed. She had that old-school calmness about her, the kind that made you feel like nothing in the world was urgent. We'd speak occasionally when we'd both be outside gardening. She complimented my roses once. I offered her basil from our little herb patch. She'd decline, always with a soft laugh. I didn't think much of it. Honestly, I thought she might have been a bit lonely. I'd see her sitting outside in the early evenings, reading in her patio chair with a blanket and a mug. She always looked like peace embodied. What I didn't know, what I never expected, was that Darren started talking to her too. At first, it was brief. A polite hello, a nice weather we're having. But something shifted. I noticed Darren mowing the lawn more frequently, volunteering to fix the fence that had been leaning for months, even offering to help carry Helen's groceries. I didn't think it was inappropriate. She was older for one, and she didn't seem flirtatious in the slightest. I chalked it up to Darren being kind. But then I started noticing the small things. He started staying outside longer than usual. I'd glance through the kitchen window and see him, leaning on the fence, his posture relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. Talking to her, smiling. Once I saw her laugh and place a hand on his forearm gently. I felt something twist in my stomach. One evening, after dinner, Darren said he was going for a walk. I offered to join him. It was something we used to do. He hesitated for a second too long, then said, "Maybe tomorrow. I just need to clear my head tonight." That night, I watched him from the bedroom window. He wasn't walking. He was sitting on Helen's patio. She handed him a drink, and they talked for nearly an hour. I confronted him 2 nights later, gently. He denied anything inappropriate. Said she just reminded him of his late mother, calming, wise, non-judgmental. He claimed it was nice to talk to someone who didn't make everything a problem. Those words stung. I started doubting myself. Had I become difficult? Had I spent too much time focused on work, the kids, the bills? Had I stopped listening? I tried to be more present, cooked his favorite meals, initiated more conversations. I even tried to ask about his day again like I used to when we were newlyweds, but he seemed distracted. One night, after he went to bed, I sat in the living room in the dark and cried. I wasn't sure why. Nothing had happened, technically, but something was shifting, and I felt like I was being erased. Weeks passed, and the distance between us grew thicker. We still shared a bed, still paid bills together, but we were no longer with each other. And then, the envelope arrived. It was in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Darren and Helen sitting on a bench in the park. Not touching, but close. Her hand resting slightly behind his back. It was intimate. There was a note attached, typed in neat lines. "You deserve to know." I don't know who sent it. I never found out. I showed it to Darren. His face went pale. He didn't deny it this time. He didn't admit to an affair, either just said he found peace with her, and that it didn't mean what I thought. But by then. It didn't matter what it meant. I moved out a month later, rented a small garden cottage not far from my old home. I still see Helen sometimes when I drive past, sipping tea in her chair. Sometimes Darren's car is in the driveway. I've never confronted her. What would I even say? Oddly, I don't hate her. She never lied to me. She was just there, present. Something I forgot how to be, maybe. But I've started to be that for myself now. I grow my own herbs in little pots. I read on the patio. I drink tea with both hands. I speak to my neighbors kindly. I've even started walking in the evenings, not to escape, but to breathe. Some nights, I wonder if I had been Helen, if I had brought that peace into our home, would things have turned out differently? But mostly, I just accept that not all love stories end in betrayal or rage. Some simply fade. And in that quiet loss, sometimes you find yourself again. Story 2. I regret firing the housekeeper my mom trusted for 30 years. I grew up in a quiet house on a hill, the kind of place where the wind always felt like it whispered secrets. It was old, creaking wooden floors, peeling paint, and wallpaper that had seen better decades. But it was home. And in that home, since I was a toddler, there was Rosa. Rosa wasn't just a housekeeper. She was practically part of our family. She started working for my mom when I was still in diapers. She was soft-spoken, calm, and moved through the house like a breeze. Never in the way, never loud, always somehow making things better. She'd iron my school uniforms, hum lullabies while folding laundry, slip notes into my lunchbox reminding me to smile at least once today. I thought every household had a Rosa. I didn't understand until much later how rare she was. My mom trusted her implicitly. Rosa had a key to our house, came and went freely, knew where everything was. She knew us our routines, our quirks, the things we didn't say out loud. She watched my brother and me grow up, attended our graduations, brought homemade soup when we had colds. She never asked for much. But then life happened. My mom passed away 2 years ago. A quiet, slow decline. Cancer. Rosa stayed through all of it. She was the one who stayed overnight when I needed sleep. She held my mother's hand during those last lucid moments. After the funeral, I kept Rosa on. At first, it felt like the right thing to do, maybe even the only familiar thing. But slowly, life began shifting. My wife, Joanna, didn't really like Rosa. She said Rosa hovered, said she cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, said it was strange how much she still acted like the house was hers. I tried explaining this was Rosa's life too. She had been part of this place before Joanna ever stepped foot in it. But Joanna would give me those looks. You know the ones. Silent, disappointed, as if I was choosing loyalty over logic. One afternoon, I came home early and overheard Joanna snapping at Rosa. Something about not needing to fold the towels that way, or not touching the nursery drawers. Rosa apologized, but I could tell something inside her cracked. She never looked me in the eye after that. The tension grew until Joanna told me flat out, she has to go. This is our home now, and I don't feel comfortable with her around. I felt trapped. I didn't want to upset my wife. We were expecting our first child. Joanna said she needed a clean slate to build her own routines as a mom. So, I did it. I called Rosa to the kitchen one morning, told her, awkwardly, that we were moving in a new direction and that we wouldn't need her help anymore. She didn't say much, just nodded slowly. Her eyes didn't tear up. They didn't even flicker with sadness. They just dulled. She handed me the house key, placed it on the counter, and quietly said, "Your mother always believed this house had a soul. Be kind to it." Then she left. I didn't realize how heavy the silence would be. The first few weeks were fine. The baby came. Joanna's parents visited, we adjusted. But the house felt different. Not haunted, just hollow. The towels were folded, but not the way Rosa folded them. The windows were cleaned, but they didn't shine the same way. The smell of lemon and lavender was gone. I didn't notice how much comfort Rosa had woven into the daily rhythm of that home. She had become part of its heartbeat. Then came the letter. It was handwritten, dated 2 weeks after she left, delivered to the mailbox with no return address. Please don't worry. I've found work with another family, but I miss the creak of the floorboards near the stairs, the way the sun hits the back porch at 4 p.m., and your mother's favorite mug, the chipped one she insisted on using. I don't hold anything against you. Life changes. People move on. Just take care of the little things. They're where the love hides. I read it twice, then a third time, and I cried. Not the loud, dramatic kind of cry, just quiet tears that fell without warning. I didn't even know why I was crying so hard. Maybe guilt, maybe grief, maybe the realization that some people give you a kind of love you don't recognize until it's gone. I never told Joanna about the letter. I just tucked it in the drawer next to my mother's chipped mug. Sometimes I take it out and reread it before bed. I've thought about calling Rosa, asking her to come back, but I know it wouldn't be the same. Some things, when broken, never return in their original form. So I remember her, instead, the quiet presence that carried so much unspoken care. And I do my best, each day, to notice the little things, the way she taught me to. Story 3. The night my father's secret came out at his retirement party. My father was never the loudest man in the room. He was the type to sit back with a half smile while others argued. The kind of man who gave long, steady silences instead of fast reactions. For most of my life, I found him difficult to read. A provider, yes. Consistent, disciplined, present, but distant. He worked for the city for 41 years. First in the public maintenance department, then later as a supervisor for municipal infrastructure. He rarely missed a day of work. Left at 6 a.m., home by 4 p.m. Routine. Predictable. Just like everything else about him. We threw him a retirement party last autumn. It was small, just family, and a few of his closest coworkers. My mother wanted something bigger, but he insisted, no big speeches, no fuss. We booked the local community hall, catered sandwiches and tea, and decorated with a few balloons and printed photos of him throughout his career. Most of the photos were similar. My father in front of city trucks, next to piles of equipment surrounded by other workers in reflective vests. The party was nice, comfortable, familiar. Until the end. One of his coworkers, a man named Peter, who'd worked with him for almost 2 decades, asked to say a few words. My father looked mildly annoyed, but nodded. Peter stood with a glass of lemonade and said, "This man right here, he's more than just a supervisor. He's the kind of guy who doesn't say much, but who does more than anyone realizes." Everyone smiled politely, but then Peter kept going. He said, "Some of you may not know, but Frank used to keep extra work boots and coats in his office for the young guys who couldn't afford good ones. He bought them with his own money. Never said a word about it." There was a light murmur of surprise. I looked at my dad. His expression didn't change. Peter continued, "And remember the flood in '09? When the city wanted to cut off that block because repairs were too expensive? Frank worked overtime for 2 weeks straight without logging a single extra hour, just to get the drainage fixed so the homes wouldn't flood again. He even patched up one of the storm pipes himself with his own tools after hours. I only found out because I caught him doing it." People clapped. I remember clapping too. But something about the way my father was looking down at his hands felt off. Peter was getting emotional now. You never wanted recognition, Frank, but I just want your family to know you didn't just work a job. You protected people. There was a long pause. My father stood up slowly. He cleared his throat and said, "That's enough, Pete." But then, without warning, he kept speaking. "There's something I should say." He turned to face the small crowd, his posture stiff. "I wasn't always a good man. Most of you only knew me after I got clean. But I spent the early part of my life ruining things." The room went still. My mother stared at him, her smile frozen. He said, "I was an alcoholic for most of my 20s. I lost 3 jobs before this one. I wrecked 2 cars, missed the birth of my first son." He looked at me. My heart stopped. "You weren't supposed to know about him," he said softly. I sat there still, confused. He continued, "Before I met your mother, I was in a bad place. I had a son with a woman named Carla. I wasn't present. I barely even visited. I thought I wasn't capable of being a father, so I stayed away. That boy is in his 40s now. I haven't seen him since he was 6. The room was heavy with silence. My mother's eyes glistened, but she didn't interrupt. He looked around the room slowly. I spent the rest of my life trying to earn back the right to be called a man. I didn't want awards or speeches. I just wanted to be useful, to show up every single day. He looked back at me. "And I want you to know, I always tried to be better with you. I didn't always get it right, but I never forgot what I had done before." Then he sat down, just like that. No more words, no dramatic exit, just stillness. No one quite knew what to say. Eventually someone turned the music back on, and we all pretended the party was still happening. That night, I drove home in silence. I kept thinking about the man I'd grown up with. The father I thought I knew. I'd always assumed his coldness, his strictness, his quiet routines were just his personality. But maybe they were penance. Maybe every early morning, every overcooked steak dinner, every silent drive to school, maybe it was all part of some lifelong apology. I haven't spoken to him about it since. I haven't asked about my half-brother. I haven't pried into the past. I just started calling him more, sitting longer when we visit, listening instead of expecting him to fill the silence. And, strangely, the silence feels lighter now. Like we both know something was finally spoken aloud, and that maybe is enough. Story 4. I lied about why I stopped visiting my sister. I used to visit my sister every Sunday. It was our quiet ritual. I'd bring coffee, sometimes pastries. We'd sit on her balcony, watching the traffic go by below, talking about books we never finished, or memories we half remembered differently. Nothing profound, just sisters, just life. Then I stopped. And I told everyone, including her, that I got busy. That work was hectic, that I was overwhelmed, that life had simply gotten in the way. But that wasn't the truth. The truth is, I couldn't bear being in her apartment anymore. And it wasn't the apartment itself. It was what it reminded me of, who it reminded me of. 3 years ago, my sister, Elena, married a man named David. On the surface, David was charming. He had a steady job, made corny dad jokes, and brought her flowers every Friday. Our family liked him. I tried to like him too. But there was always something behind it, his eyes. Something cold. Something calculating. The first time I noticed it, Elena had made a small comment about forgetting to do the laundry. David didn't yell. He just smiled too long, too tightly, and said, "That's all right. I know how hard remembering things can be for you." Then he left the room. Elena laughed it off, but I saw the way her shoulders tensed. Over the next year, I saw more of those little moments. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you could point to as abuse. but the kind of slow erosion that chips away at someone's confidence. He'd correct her stories in front of us subtly. He'd say things like, "She always mixes that up," with a chuckle. He'd guide her decisions, gently, until she stopped making any without his input. She used to be so opinionated. Now, everything was, "Let me check with David first." Still, she looked happy on the outside. Posted pictures of weekend getaways, smiled in family photos, laughed when he held her hand too tightly. I started visiting less often, making excuses. But every time I did come over, I felt like I was watching a play. She'd serve snacks like she was auditioning for approval. She'd watch his face when she spoke, as if looking for cues. Then came the final straw. It was a Sunday. I'd brought croissants and a new book I thought she'd love. She seemed excited, genuinely so. But as we talked, she slipped up. She mentioned a disagreement they had something about whether she could take a weekend trip with some old college friends. I asked, "So, are you going?" She hesitated, then said, "No, he's just nervous about me traveling alone. You know how men can be." I said, "But you'd be with friends." She smiled. "Yeah, it's okay. I didn't really want to go anyway." She changed the subject, but I couldn't. I saw the bruises then, not physical, but in her voice, in her silences, in how she laughed just a little too quickly, in how she offered me more tea without ever drinking her own. I went home and cried. Not because she was suffering, but because I hadn't stopped it, because I'd let it happen quietly. I didn't confront her. I didn't sit her down and demand answers. I didn't want to risk making things worse for her behind closed doors. So instead, I disappeared. I told her work was too much, that I'd call soon, that we'd catch up, that I missed her. And I did miss her, every week. But I didn't go back. I couldn't. Every time I even thought about walking into that apartment, I felt like I was walking into a play where the main actress was slowly vanishing. Months passed. Then, a week ago, she called. I was folding laundry, half listening to the rain outside. Her name on my phone felt like a weight I wasn't ready to lift. But I answered. Her voice was soft. She said, "I left him." Just like that. I packed a suitcase, took the train to Mom's. I'm okay. He didn't fight me. He didn't cry. He just stood there, like he didn't even care. We talked for nearly 2 hours. She told me things I'd suspected and things I hadn't, how he controlled every dollar, how he slowly alienated her from friends, how he never hit her but made her feel smaller every day, like she was a guest in her own body. I asked her, "Why now?" She said, "Because I realized you stopped coming." I froze. She said, "I kept wondering why. I thought you were mad at me. But then I remembered you saw him. You saw the parts I was trying to hide. And when you disappeared, I realized I was starting to disappear too." That's when I cried. Not quietly, not gracefully. I told her everything, that I saw it, that I didn't know how to help, that I was scared I'd make it worse. She didn't blame me. She just said, "You helped more than you know, because the silence spoke." Now she's rebuilding, staying at Mom's, seeing a counselor, learning to like coffee without looking over her shoulder. She says she sleeps better now, even though the bed is colder. We've gone back to our Sunday mornings this time at Mom's kitchen table. The pastries are still there. So is the coffee. But the best part? She laughs now, and it's hers again. Story 5. I found a letter my grandmother hid in her Bible. When my grandmother passed, she left behind very little. She wasn't poor. She was just simple. She lived in the same house for 52 years, A weathered white cottage with hydrangeas out front and creaky floors that hummed like old violins. The kind of house where time seemed to slow down. I was the one who volunteered to help clear it out. My mother was too emotional. My uncle's too busy. And truthfully, I wanted the silence. I wanted to be alone in that space again. The smell of old wood and soap, the way the light filtered through those yellowing curtains, the familiar dust that never quite left the corners. She had a bookshelf in the hallway, mostly hymnals, old gardening guides, and a few cookbooks with stained pages. Nestled between them was her Bible. It was thick, black leather, gold-edged pages. I wasn't planning to open it, but something about the way it sat slightly off-center with a dried clover poking out pulled me in. Tucked inside, around the middle, was a letter. Not typed, not folded neatly. Just a slightly crumpled page, written in her delicate, looping handwriting, dated 1979. At first, I thought it was a note to God, a prayer, maybe, but it wasn't. It was addressed to my grandfather, James. If you're reading this, it means I never had the courage to say it aloud. I've loved you. I truly have. But not the way I think a woman should love a husband. Not in the way that keeps a fire warm. I stayed because of the children, because of our name, because I was taught that leaving wasn't an option. But I want you to know there was a man. Once. Just once. It didn't last. I told him no when he asked me to run away. I chose this life instead. And every day, I wonder if that made me strong, or just scared. I never stopped thinking about him. I kept the scarf he gave me. It's in the attic, behind the sewing box. I'm sorry. I'm not proud, but I needed to say it somewhere. To someone. Forgive me, if you can, or just understand me, if you can't. M. I reread it 3 times. It was like time slowed to a crawl. I sat there, in her hallway, with the afternoon sun painting gold lines on the floor, holding a truth I never asked for. My grandparents were married 48 years. They raised 3 children, hosted Sunday dinners, played cards every Thursday night. I never saw them argue. But I also never saw them touch, not really. Their love always felt functional. This letter cracked that illusion wide open. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to feel betrayed on behalf of my grandfather, who died when I was 12. A quiet, stern man who always had peppermint candies in his coat pocket. But instead, I felt something else. I felt sadness, not scandal, not judgment, just a deep, aching sadness for a woman I thought I knew. She stayed. She gave up something. She buried a part of herself, and then, years later, tucked the truth into the one book no one in our family ever questioned. Her Bible. The sacred hiding place. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother. Not my aunts. I put the letter back where I found it, between the book of Psalms and Proverbs, closed the Bible, slid it back on the shelf. But I did go to the attic. The sewing box was there, same one I remembered from childhood. Behind it, wrapped in plastic, was a thin red scarf, faded now, but I imagined how bright it must have been when it was first given, how daring. I didn't take it. I just sat beside it for a while, imagining her in her 20s, laughing, tempted, torn. I realized something that day. Sometimes people carry stories they'll never tell because they don't want to unwrite the lives they've already lived. But they still need to put those stories somewhere. A letter, a box, a scarf, not to be found, but to be witnessed, eventually. I don't know if my grandmother ever regretted her choice. But I think she wanted someone to know that she once had a choice, that she could have lived a different life. And somehow, that makes me love her more. Story 6. I let my childhood best friend walk out of my life, and I still don't know if it was the right call. We met in the summer of 1997 at a neighborhood pool that doesn't even exist anymore. His name was Marcus. I was 8, he was 9, and we bonded over a mutual hatred of swimming lessons and an obsession with trading cards. Our friendship didn't feel like something that happened, it felt like something that had always been. We lived 3 blocks apart and spent entire childhoods on bikes, eating cold peanut butter sandwiches, getting grass stains we'd later be scolded for, and telling each other we'd never grow apart. Of course we did, but not all at once. We went to different high schools, then different universities. The phone calls became texts, the texts became memes, and the memes eventually stopped. But every now and then, there'd be a message out of nowhere, "You still alive?" Or, "Remember when we made that ramp and broke your mom's rake?" And it would be like nothing changed. For 5 minutes, we were kids again. When we were both around 29, Marcus moved back to our hometown. I had stayed, got married, settled into a teaching job, bought a house. My life was measured in calendars and grocery lists. Marcus, meanwhile, had been living out of a van for 2 years, documenting his travels on a quiet blog and working odd jobs for just enough money to keep moving. He called me one night. I hadn't heard his voice in years. "Hey," he said, like no time had passed. "I'm in town. Got room on the couch?" Of course I did. He stayed for 3 weeks. My wife didn't mind at first. She liked his stories, the photos from Arizona deserts, the way he knew how to fix anything, the way our toddler son adored him. But there was tension. Quiet, creeping tension. Marcus would disappear for hours without saying where he was going. He'd bring home strangers, sometimes nothing dangerous, just people he'd met at a bar or coffee shop. One night, it was a musician who played our out-of-tune piano until 2 a.m. My wife sat me down. "He's not a bad person," she said gently, "but this isn't your college apartment. This is your home." She was right, but it felt like betrayal to admit it. Marcus and I had talked once about starting a business together, back when we were 17. A skate shop of all things. We had no plan, just dreams and scratched up sneakers. I think part of me still held on to that fantasy. On his last night, we sat outside on the back steps. The moon was low, our son was asleep upstairs. My wife had gone to bed early. Marcus lit a cigarette, then offered me one. I declined. He looked at me for a while, then said, "I can feel it. You're pulling away." I didn't respond right away. He exhaled slowly. "You don't have to say it. I know I'm not meant for this kind of life. You've got real stuff now. A kid, a job, a wife who folds your socks." He smiled, but it was tired. I said, "You could stay longer. Get a place. Start fresh." He shook his head. "You know that's not me." And I did know. He left the next morning before sunrise. I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Thanks for letting me be part of your normal. It reminded me of what I gave up. Don't feel bad. We're just different now. And that's okay." He left a keychain, too. A cheap plastic one we won at a carnival when we were 12. It used to hang on his backpack. Now it hangs on my garage hook, next to my house keys. That was 5 years ago. We still text sometimes. He sends pictures of mountaintops and strangers' dogs. I send photos of my kid growing taller, the garden we planted, the slow changes of a rooted life. But I still think about that last night. Could I have done more? Should I have fought harder to keep him close? Or did I do the right thing by letting him go before resentment had the chance to bloom? There's no real answer. Some friendships end in flames. Others just drift like feathers in the wind, floating out of reach before you even realize you're reaching. I miss him, that's all. And sometimes, when the house is quiet and the moon is low, I imagined the two of us kids again, on bikes, chasing the wind, not knowing it would eventually carry us in different directions. Story 7. I took care of my neighbor's dog for a month, and it changed how I saw my own life. I've lived in the same house for 15 years. It's quiet, comfortable, one of those cul-de-sac neighborhoods where people wave from their driveways but don't ask too many questions. I like it that way. I keep my lawn trimmed, my head down, and my coffee black. My neighbor across the street, Marlene, is in her late 70s, a widow. She lives alone with a scrappy little mutt named Tucker. He's small, tan, a little too loud, and very attached to her. I'd see them every morning, her in her blue windbreaker, Tucker waddling beside her on a leash that looked older than him. She always smiled, waved. Sometimes she'd toss a comment about the weather or her tomatoes. I always responded politely. Nothing more. Then one morning, there was no walk, no Tucker, no Marlene. That evening, I saw an ambulance outside her house. I watched from the window like a coward. She was taken away on a stretcher. Her front light stayed on all night. The next day, a younger woman, maybe in her 40s, came by and knocked on my door, introduced herself as Marlene's daughter, Ruth, said her mother had suffered a minor stroke and would be in rehabilitation for a few weeks. Then she asked, "Would you be willing to take care of Tucker?" I hesitated. I don't like dogs. Never have. They're loud. They shed. They need attention. But before I could answer, she added, "He's really not doing well without her." So I said yes. She dropped him off with a bag of food, his bed, and a leash that definitely needed replacing. The first few days were rough. Tucker barked at the smallest noises, whined at the door every night, refused to eat unless I sat near his bowl. I didn't understand it at first how needy he was. But by the end of the week, something shifted. I started taking him on the same walk he used to go on with Marlene. Same time, same route. And every morning, without fail, he'd pause in front of her driveway, just stand there, waiting. The first time, I tugged gently on the leash. "She's not home, buddy." He didn't move, just stared. It became our routine. He'd pause there, I'd wait with him. Then eventually, we'd keep going. Always the same. In the evenings, I'd find myself talking to him. I don't know why. Maybe because the house felt less empty with him there. Maybe because he listened, or at least didn't interrupt. I told him about my ex-wife, how we divorced 7 years ago, and how I still think about the quiet that followed. I told him about my father's old watch I keep in a drawer, but never wear. I even told him about the time I almost moved to Oregon, packed boxes and everything, and then changed my mind because the realtor said it wasn't a great market. He never judged, just sat there, breathing softly. One night, it stormed. Tucker whimpered the whole time. I ended up letting him sleep at the foot of my bed. That was the first full night of sleep I'd had in months. Week 3, I started taking pictures of him on our walks. Sent a few to Ruth. She replied with, "He looks happier." "Thank you." That message made my chest feel strange, warm, but heavy. Then came the day Marlene returned. She'd recovered well, walked a bit slower, but her smile was still the same. Ruth picked up Tucker that afternoon. He didn't bark or fuss. He just looked at me before leaving eyes soft, tail wagging like he understood it was goodbye. The silence after he left was immediate, not dramatic, just felt, like walking into a room that used to hum with life and finding it still. 2 days later, I saw them on their walk again. Marlene waved. Tucker barked at a passing bird. Everything was back to normal. Except it wasn't, not for me. I stood on my porch for longer than usual that morning. The sun was softer. The wind smelled like cut grass. And I realized I missed something. Not just the dog, but the connection, the rhythm, the presence of something needing me, something noticing when I entered a room. So I went to the shelter the next week. His name is Ralph. He's not like Tucker. He's older, slower, and way too big for my house. But he sits by my side like it's the only place he's ever wanted to be. And I find myself smiling more. Sometimes, a life doesn't need to fall apart to be rebuilt. Sometimes, it just needs a small, persistent heartbeat, one that barks too much, tracks in dirt, and forces you to feel something again. Story 8. The day my son asked why I don't have friends. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. The sun was soft through the living room window, that pale golden light that makes everything feel like it's been dusted in memory. I was folding laundry. My 8-year-old son, Jacob, was sprawled out on the rug, organizing his toy cars into neat rows. He's meticulous like that. He asked so casually I almost missed it. "Dad, why don't you have any friends?" I froze mid-fold, a pair of socks limp in my hands. I turned toward him slowly. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Like, you don't go anywhere with anyone. Mommy has Aunt Kayla, but you just stay home." I gave some vague answer, something like, "Well, adults are busy," or "I see people at work." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his toy cars. But the question sat with me. Like a stone dropped in still water, rippling out further than I expected. That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the kitchen alone and thought about it. Why didn't I have friends anymore? The thing is, I used to. College friends, old coworkers, people I'd watch football with or meet for drinks, or just text dumb jokes to during the day. But over time, it all faded. Part of it was life, kids, careers, distance. But if I'm honest, part of it was me. I stopped reaching out, declined a few too many invitations, made too many vague promises of next time. I told myself I was just tired, that I needed quiet, that I had a family now, and that was enough. But maybe, deep down, I stopped believing people wanted me around. It's a quiet sort of thing. You miss a few calls. You assume they found closer friends. You tell yourself you're not offended when you're not invited. And one day, you wake up and you realize you don't belong to anyone outside your home anymore. I didn't notice it until Jacob pointed it out. I started watching myself differently after that. When we'd go to the park, I'd see the other dads chatting. Not about anything deep, just complaining about gas prices or the game last night. But there was warmth in it, familiarity, a comfort I hadn't realized I missed. I didn't say anything to my wife right away, but she noticed, like she always does. "You've been quiet lately," she said one night as we brushed our teeth. I shrugged, just tired. But later that week, she nudged me. "Why don't you invite Tom over?" Tom was a neighbor, the kind you wave at for years without knowing his last name. We talked maybe 4 times total, always in the driveway. But I texted him. It felt awkward, like being a teenager again. "Hey, want to come by this weekend, grab a drink or something?" He replied almost immediately, "Yeah, would love to. Been meaning to ask you the same." That weekend we sat on the porch and talked for almost 3 hours. About nothing, about everything. He told me he'd gone through something similar after his second kid was born. Said he didn't talk to his best friend for nearly a year just because life felt too full. It felt good, like stretching muscles I'd forgotten I had. Since then, we've made it a weekly thing. Sometimes it's just the two of us. Sometimes our wives join. Sometimes the kids run around while we grill cheap burgers and pretend we know what we're doing. And Jacob, he noticed. He asked, Is Mr. Tom your friend now? I smiled and said, Yeah, I think he is. He grinned, then said, That's good. Everyone should have one. Maybe that's the lesson. Friendship isn't about the number of people you know or how loud the laughs are. Sometimes it's about choosing to show up again, even if it's been a while. Even if you're rusty. It's about answering a simple question with action. And remembering that we don't outgrow connection. We just forget to water it sometimes. Story 9. I told a student he'd never amount to anything, and I was wrong. I taught high school English for nearly 20 years. Not in a prestigious district, not in some picture-perfect prep school, just a regular public school, faded lockers, fluorescent lights, and budget coffee that always tasted like burnt toast. But I loved it. I loved the rhythm of it. The fresh notebooks in January, the way the hallways smelled like pencil shavings and cheap perfume. I retired 3 years ago, but there's one student I still think about. His name was Devin. He was 15 when he landed in my class. Always late, always tired. Always had this look in his eyes. Not anger, not arrogance, just a sort of exhaustion that didn't belong on a teenager's face. He never turned in homework on time. He'd scribble answers, clearly copied. His essays read like someone who had never believed their thoughts were worth much. At first, I tried. I sat with him after class, gave him second chances, wrote encouraging comments, but nothing stuck. One day, I asked him to stay after school. He slouched in the chair, chewing his pen cap, eyes darting to the clock. I asked, "What's going on, Devin?" He shrugged. "Nothing." I pressed him. "You're smart. I know you are. So why aren't you even trying?" He looked at me and said, flatly, "Because people like me don't end up anywhere good." I didn't know what to say. I told him that wasn't true, that I believed in him, that effort mattered. But here's the part I regret. A month later, after another missed assignment and another late arrival, I snapped. I didn't yell, but I said something sharp, something I wish I could take back. I said, "You're going to waste your life if you don't start acting like it's worth something." And then the part that still echoes, I added, "You're smart, but not even smartness helps someone who doesn't care." He didn't argue. He just stood up, packed his bag, and walked out. The rest of the year passed in a blur. He barely spoke, barely showed up. I stopped trying. Told myself he didn't want help. He disappeared after that. I heard he dropped out. Moved out of state. No one knew much more. Years passed. I kept teaching. Retired quietly. Started helping at the library part-time, mostly shelving books and running a monthly poetry night. It's peaceful work. Quiet. One evening, a man walked into the library, late 30s. Worn leather jacket, a little tired around the eyes, but smiling. He said, "Mr. Harding." I looked up, heart skipping. "Yes?" He stuck out his hand. "It's Devin." I barely recognized him. He told me his story. He'd worked construction for years, saved up, took night classes, failed some, kept going, eventually finished a degree in electrical engineering, got married, had a son, bought a small house. "I never stopped hearing what you said that day," he told me. I tensed, braced myself. He smiled, not the harsh part, the other part, the part where you said I was smart. He continued, "Nobody had ever said that to me, not like they meant it. It stuck with me even when I hated you for a while." We talked for nearly an hour, about life, about grit, about how sometimes it's not gentle moments that stay with us, but the ones that pierce and plant something. Before he left, he said, "I came back because I wanted you to know I made it." and that you helped, even if you didn't know you did. I walked home that night slowly. The stars were out. The breeze was soft. And I thought about how we never really know which words linger in someone's chest, whether we speak life into them or plant a doubt that takes years to uproot. Devin reminded me that it's never too late to become someone different, and never too late to undo something with kindness. Now, when I see students in town older, grown, I smile first. I ask them how they are. I try to listen better, speak slower, because even the smallest conversation might be the one they carry for years. Story 10. I almost sold my house until I heard the floorboard creak. Last year, I nearly sold the house I've lived in for most of my adult life. Not because I had to, not for any real dramatic reason, just life felt stale, quiet in a way that made the days blur together. My kids are grown, my wife passed 3 years ago, and the silence in the evenings has become less of a presence and more of a weight. The house is too big for one person. 4 bedrooms, a dusty attic, and a backyard that needs more love than I have energy for. So I cleaned, listed it, called a real estate agent, took the photos, staged the rooms, even fixed the back fence that had been leaning for years. One Thursday afternoon, I had my first serious showing. A young couple, newly married, still finishing each other's sentences. They walked through the kitchen, wide-eyed at the original countertops, said something about knocking down a wall. Said the attic could be turned into an office or maybe a nursery someday. I nodded and smiled, pretended I wasn't staring at the place like it was already someone else's. After they left, the agent gave me the usual lines. Promising couple. Good offer likely. Great bones. I told him I'd think on it and call him tomorrow. That night, I made tea. Same chipped mug I've used for years. Same soft crack in the handle from when my daughter knocked it off the counter in middle school. Still holds warmth just fine. I sat in the living room with the lights off, letting the house hum around me. Then I heard it. The floorboard. Third one from the hallway entrance. The one that creaks, no matter how light your step. The one my wife used to tease me about when I'd try to sneak in after late meetings. The one my son used to avoid when he was sneaking snacks past bedtime. The one my daughter always stepped on, no matter how hard she tried not to. That sound, that low, familiar groan of old wood echoed like a voice I hadn't heard in years. And suddenly, I wasn't in an empty house. I was surrounded by memories. The tea kettle whistling over homework at the table, the echo of my wife's laugh in the kitchen on Sunday mornings, the thud of basketballs hitting the hallway wall, followed by apologies and muffled giggles. This wasn't just wood and paint. It was our story. I got up, walked through each room, noticed things I'd forgotten. A tiny handprint in the guest room closet from when we painted it pale yellow. A scuff on the wall from a dropped suitcase. A drawing on the underside of a shelf, signed in crayon, "I love you, Dad." The attic still smelled like cedar, still had the trunk full of costumes we never threw away. I sat on the floor and opened it, pulling out a wizard hat, a pirate eye patch, and an old scarf my wife used to wear when she read bedtime stories in character voices. By the time the sun rose, I'd made my decision. I called the agent, told him to take it off the market. He asked if I was sure. I said, I think the house still needs me. But really, I still needed it. Not because it was practical, not because I couldn't live somewhere smaller, or newer, or quieter, but because this house remembers me. And I want to grow old in a place that knows my story, not one that starts from blank walls. So I mow the lawn every other weekend now. Paint one room at a time, not for resale value, just to care for it. The creaky floorboard still speaks every night when I pass by. And I've come to love that sound because it means this is still home. Thank you for spending this quiet hour with us. If these stories helped ease your mind, brought you calm, please consider subscribing and joining our peaceful community. Sweet dreams, and remember, rest is the first step to a brighter tomorrow.